In the vast, unfeeling void of space, the orbital megaprison known as Fort Doom. Because what else would you call a prison that's basically a death sentence with extra steps, hung like a forgotten ornament on a particularly ugly Christmas tree? It was a place where governments dumped the galaxy's most irritating problems, or as the inmates called themselves, diversity gone rogue. Imagine a melting pot, but this one's full of acid, and you've got the picture. Dr. Mara Solstice, a Zen archaeologist with as much patience for bureaucracy as a rat has for a snake, found herself on this cosmic dump courtesy of a misplaced sense of duty to her profession. Study the relics, they'd said. It'll be fascinating, they'd promised. Nobody mentioned the part about sharing oxygen with enough alien psychopaths to start an interstellar war if they ever agreed on anything, which fortunately, they never did. Mara was currently trying to figure out if the etchings on the relics she'd been assigned to study were ancient poetry or just a very elaborate prank. She'd bet on the latter because aliens were universally terrible at humor. Her calm buzzed, dragging her back from the brink of actually having to care. Messages from the prison warden were always a treat. "Dr. Solstice," crackled the voice of Warden Gull, a man whose only hobby seemed to be seeing how many syllables he could fit into a sigh. "I assume you've heard the alarms." Mara glanced around at the flashing red lights and blaring sirens. "Oh, is that what that is? I thought it was just my enthusiasm for this place finally manifesting physically. We have a situation," Gull continued, either ignoring or entirely missing Mara's sarcasm. "An unidentified alien force attempted a breach." Attempted. "So they failed." "Yes, but it's caused a bit of a stir. A bit of a stir in Fort Doom usually meant someone's head got mistakenly used as a soccer ball. Let me guess, the prisoners weren't impressed with the newcomer's performance." "You could say that," Gull replied, in the kind of tone that suggested several heads had become impromptu sporting equipment. "We need you to stay put." "Stay put, sure. It's not like I have plans or anything." Mara closed the comm, wondering how she'd let herself get talked into this gig. She scanned the room, filled with relics that looked like the discount aisle of a particularly esoteric antiques shop. Each piece was allegedly priceless, but try and find a buyer for something that might just explode if you looked at it funny. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the prison, the various alien inmates were taking the news of the failed invasion with all the grace of a drunken elephant in a china shop. "They came all this way to say hello and forgot their manners at the door," quipped Raxer, a three-eyed, purple-skinned humanoid who'd seen more bar brawls than a galactic bartender. "I mean, if you're going to crash a party, at least bring a gift." His companion, a hulking insectoid named Gribbs, clicked his mandibles in what was probably agreement. "Stupid invaders. Make big noise, do nothing." "Sounds like my ex-wife," Raxer muttered, earning a chittering laugh from Gribbs. Back in the relative safety of the research lab, Mara picked up one of the smaller relics. It hummed slightly, like a cat that might decide you've pet it wrong and swat you any second. "What secrets do you hold, you little cosmic joke?" she mused aloud. The door hissed open, and in walked Trask, a security officer whose primary skill seemed to be his ability to look like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Doc, you okay?" Mara turned, waving the relic slightly. "Just bonding with this piece of space junk." Trask nodded, the kind of nod that said he didn't really get it but wasn't going to ask. "You hear about the invasion? Tried and failed. Story of my life." Trask smirked, a rare sight. "You should write a book." "I would, but I'd need something more thrilling than this place to write about." "Like watching paint dry or the thrilling world of sock matching." Trask's comm beeped, cutting off his retort. He glanced at it, then back at Mara. "All clear, but they want everyone to stay on alert." "Ah, heightened alertness in Fort Doom. It's like telling a fish to stay wet." Trask shrugged. "Just doing my job." "Aren't we all?" Mara replied, setting the relic down. "Think this invasion was just a test?" "If it was, they flunked harder than a Space Academy dropout." Mara smiled slightly. "That's a comfort. At least we know they're worse at their job than we are at ours." Keep safe, Doc, Trask said, turning to leave. You too, officer, not a chance in hell, Mara replied, watching the door slide shut behind him. The lights flickered ominously, as if the universe decided it needed to remind everyone that, yes, they were still in deep space, and yes, things could get worse. Mara sat back down, half-heartedly examining another relic. It was a jagged piece of something that might have been important to someone at some point, but now it was just another mystery in a place full of them. Maybe I should have been a dentist, she said to herself. At least teeth don't come with existential dread. The prison's automated systems blared another message, this time a cheerful reminder to all inmates about the consequences of riot participation. Death or worse, more life inside Fort Doom. It was like they'd hired a motivational speaker with an affinity for despair. As Mara pondered the irony of her situation, an unsettling thought crept into her mind. What if the attack was just the beginning? What if these relics, these alien artifacts she'd been so flippantly dismissing, held the key to something far more dangerous than a few disgruntled aliens with bad manners? She picked up the humming relic again, feeling its strange vibration through her fingertips. "All right, little guy," she murmured. "Time to see what secrets you're keeping." As she began to probe the relic with her scanner, the device flickered, displaying symbols that twisted and danced, almost mocking her inability to decipher them. "Oh great," Mara sighed. "A cosmic Rubik's Cube." The lights dimmed further, the sirens a distant echo now, leaving an eerie calm in their wake. Fort Doom had momentarily forgotten its own chaos, as if holding its breath for the next act of this cosmic farce. Mara continued her work, the relic's hum growing louder, resonating with the unease that had settled in her gut. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever these artifacts were hiding was about to rewrite the script in a way no one was prepared for. And in the silence of space, as the megaprison drifted through the void, a subtle shift began. Outwardly imperceptible, but within the confines of Fort Doom, the relics whispered secrets of galaxies gone by, of powers untapped, and of an ancient war that never truly ended. Mara's calm buzzed again, startling her out of her thoughts. It was Gull, of course, his voice carrying the weight of someone perpetually disappointed in reality. "Dr. Solstice, we've got another problem. Is it the kind of problem that makes me wish for a sudden vacuum breach?" "The relics," Gull said, ignoring her gallows humor. "They're reacting to something. I need you to find out what." She sighed, because what else could she do? Sure, why not? "It's not like I was busy trying to avoid an existential crisis or anything." As she pocketed her scanner and prepared to delve deeper into the relic's mysteries, she couldn't help but chuckle darkly. "Welcome to Fort Doom," she muttered under her breath, "where the fun never stops and neither does the impending doom." Little did she know, the relics were more than just ancient souvenirs. They were keys, each holding the power to unravel the very fabric of the prison, of the universe itself. And as the echoes of the failed invasion faded into the cold steel of Fort Doom, the real threat was just beginning to stir, hidden within the relics Mara had been so eager to dismiss. "Doctor." Mara Solstice stared at the relic in her hand, which, to her dismay, hummed louder, like it was trying to communicate in Morse code but with a stutter. It was round, about the size of a grapefruit, and looked like a metal porcupine having a bad hair day. She twisted it, shook it, and even tried talking to it, because why not? When you're stuck in Fort Doom, sanity is a distant memory. "Come on, little guy," she muttered. "Give me something I can use. A winning lottery number, a recipe for disaster, anything." The relic blinked back at her with all the enthusiasm of a dying light bulb. She sighed, setting it down on the cold, steel table cluttered with otherworldly artifacts that looked like they'd been designed by a committee on bad acid. The comm crackled again, this time spitting out a series of high-pitched squeaks that only meant one thing. Warden Gull was back. "Dr. Solstice, any progress?" "Oh yes," Mara replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I've unlocked the secrets of the universe and discovered that it's all one big cosmic joke. Can you translate that into something useful?" Gull said, voice as flat as a pancake run over by a space freighter. Not unless you think cosmic joke qualifies, she retorted, the relic's hum still buzzing in her ears like an annoying bee that refused to be swatted. Meanwhile, outside her cramped lab, the prison corridors buzzed with a different kind of energy. The failed invasion had left a mark, not unlike a bad tattoo that everyone regretted. The alien inmates, a ragtag bunch of misfits with delusions of grandeur, started whispering in corners, forming alliances like politicians in a scandal. Raxer, the purple-skinned humanoid with a penchant for bad jokes, leaned against the wall in cell block D, which smelled like a locker room after a championship game. "Have you heard the latest?" he asked Gribbs, his insectoid sidekick who had the charm of a guillotine operator. Gribbs clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Heard what?" "The relics," Raxer said, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "They're buzzing." Like literally buzzing, Gribbs narrowed his compound eyes. "You think they're communicating?" "I think they're trying," Raxer replied, crossing his arms. "And if they are, maybe they're not too happy being stuck in this flying dumpster." Gribbs nodded, his mind whirring like a rusty cog. "Could be. Stupid humans probably don't even know what they're sitting on." "Probably not," Raxer agreed, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "But we do." Back in the lab, Mara continued her less than fruitful investigation, her scanner flickering as she passed it over the relic again. Symbols danced and twisted, reminding her of her high school algebra class, confusing and utterly pointless. "All right," she said, addressing the relic as if it were a temperamental pet. "What are you trying to tell me, and can you do it without the cryptic light show?" The relic dimmed, as if considering her request, then brightened again, casting strange shadows on the walls. Mara squinted at the symbols, trying to piece together a language that looked like someone tried to write with their non-dominant hand while drunk. Just then the lab door whooshed open and in shuffled Warden Gull, his face set to its usual default of tired irritation. "Dr. Solstice, Warden," she acknowledged, not bothering to look up. "To what do I owe the displeasure?" Gull ignored the jab. "The relics. They're causing disturbances across the prison." "We need answers." "Join the club," Mara muttered, her eyes glued to the relic as if sheer willpower could force it to spill its secrets. "I'm working on it." "We don't have time for working on it," Gull snapped, his normally monotone voice betraying a hint of urgency. "The inmates are restless. We need results." "Results," Mara repeated, finally looking up. "I can give you those. They're just not the kind you're hoping for." Gull's gaze hardened, a silent demand for something, anything, that could justify her presence here and calm the increasingly jittery inmates. All right," Mara said, raising her hands in mock surrender. "I'll keep poking it. But if it bites back, I'm blaming you." "Understood," Gull replied, turning on his heel and leaving her alone with the humming relic and her mounting frustration. In the dimly lit corridors, the alien inmates continued their quiet rebellion, eyes glinting with a mix of fear and anticipation. They knew something was coming, something big, and that knowledge was a potent cocktail, one they were eager to sip. Raxer and Gribbs found themselves in the mess hall, where the food was as inspiring as the Daker, which is to say not at all. They grabbed their trays, laden with gray slop that might have been oatmeal in another life, and settled at a corner table. "We need a plan," Gribbs said, eyeing the slop with suspicion. "Plans are for people who care," Raxer replied, pushing his food around with a spoon. "We just need an opportunity," Gribbs clicked in agreement. "Opportunity for what?" Raxer leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "For chaos. That's the only currency that matters in a place like this." "And the relics?" Gribbs asked, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "They are the key," Raxer said, his expression turning serious for once. "If we can figure out what they are trying to do, we might have a shot at turning this dump inside out." In the lab, Mara was starting to feel like a character in a bad sitcom. The relic continued to hum, vibrating slightly under her touch as if imparting secrets just beyond her grasp. She glanced at her scanner, which blipped in a cadence that might have been Morse code for good luck. Sucker, she sighed, kneeling beside the table to rummage through a box of tools. Maybe a different approach was in order. She pulled out a magnifying lens, the kind used by jewelers, and clipped it to her glasses. Squinting through the lens, she took a closer look at the relic's surface, her breath fogging up the lens almost immediately. "Come on, show me something I can use," she grumbled, twisting the relic in her hands. The symbols still danced just beyond comprehension, mocking her efforts. Her comm pinged again, this time with a message from Trask. "Doc, you alive in there?" "Depends on your definition of alive," she replied, not bothering to hide her exasperation. "Things are getting twitchy out here," Trask said, his voice tinged with genuine concern. "The inmates are up to something." "When aren't they?" Mara replied, knowing full well that Fort Doom was a breeding ground for bad ideas. "I'll see what I can dig up." "Good luck," Trask said. "And Doc, watch your back." "Always do," Mara replied before cutting the connection. As she returned to her investigation, the relic's hum intensified, vibrating with a low, rhythmic pulse. It was as if it sensed her growing determination, responding to her efforts with a renewed energy. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. Maybe, just maybe, the relics were more than just cosmic paperweights. If they were linked to the failed invasion attempt, their secrets could be the key to everything. The answers to why Fort Doom was suddenly the galaxy's least desirable hot spot. In the mess hall, Raxor and Gribbs continued their scheming, their conversation punctuated by the occasional clatter of trays and muttered curses from other inmates. "We need to spread the word," Raxor said, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Get the others on board." "Not gonna be easy," Gribbs replied, stripping a piece of food from his mandibles. "Too many of them still loyal to their own." "That's fine," Raxor said, shrugging. "All we need is a spark." As the two inmates plotted, Mara returned her attention to the relic, determined to unravel its mysteries. If she could find the connection between the artifacts and the rising tension in the prison, maybe, just maybe, she could stop the powder keg from exploding. The hum filled the room, a constant reminder of the chaos lurking just beneath the surface. She adjusted the scanner, recalibrating its settings in the hope of extracting something useful from the relic's cryptic symbols. "This had better be worth it," Mara muttered as she continued her work. "Because if it's not, I'm going to need a new hobby, preferably one that doesn't involve impending doom." The relic vibrated again, its symbols flickering with a renewed urgency, promising secrets she was desperate to uncover. Outside, in the corridors of Fort Doom, the inmates sensed the shifting balance, anticipation mingling with fear. Alliances formed, plans hatched, and the air buzzed with the electric pulse of impending change. Dr. Solstice remained hunched over her work, the relic's hum now a comforting rhythm as she delved deeper into its mysteries. Unbeknownst to her, the secrets she sought would soon spill into the open, igniting a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Fort Doom, and perhaps the galaxy itself. In the oppressive silence of space, the prison drifted through the void, an island of chaos waiting for the storm. And in the heart of it all, Mara Solstice worked tirelessly, unaware that the relic she studied held the power to unleash a force beyond comprehension. Because in Fort Doom, the real danger was never the inmates. It was what they could become when the pieces finally fell into place. And as the story of relics, invaders, and restless prisoners unfolded, the universe watched, waiting for the punchline of a cosmic joke that had yet to be told. "Doctor," Mara Solstice leaned back in her chair, the relentless hum of the relic vibrating through her skull like a bad techno track. She rubbed her temples, contemplating the metallic enigma that was threatening to become her life's work, and not the fulfilling kind. More like the "how did my life choices lead me here" variety. "All right, space toaster," she murmured, addressing the relic. "Let's see what you're really made of, and please don't make me regret this." She tapped a few keys on her console, and the relic's symbols flickered in response like they were teasing her. Symbols twisted and turned, rearranging themselves into a pattern that made as much sense as a politician's promise. But then something clicked, or rather it pinged. A sequence emerged, repeating with a regularity that even a cat on Red Bull couldn't disrupt. Mara blinked and sat up. "Well, will you look at that?" she muttered, running a hand through her hair. "A message, or maybe just cosmic spam. Either way, it's more than we've had." She hit the record button, capturing the sequence for further analysis. Whatever this was, it was no mere artifact. It was a communicator, and the message was clear. Someone, or something, had a vested interest in Fort Doom. Meanwhile, Warden Gull wasn't the only one with his knickers in a twist. Captain Thera Voss, a no-nonsense officer with all the warmth of a vacuum, was stalking the corridors of Fort Doom like a hawk with a particularly annoying mouse in its sights. She had a knack for making people feel like they were wearing a target on their back just by looking at them. She marched into the lab, her boots clapping against the metal floor with the kind of authority that demanded attention, or at least minimal eye contact. "Dr. Solstice," she said, her tone as sharp as a broken bottle. "I hear you're making progress." Mara didn't bother to look up. "Define progress." "Anything that resembles an answer," Voss replied, crossing her arms. "Because right now all I see are questions." "Join the club," Mara said, finally tearing her eyes away from the relic. "But I did find something. A pattern, a message. Probably not a dinner invitation, though." Voss leaned over the console, frowning at the sequence displayed there. "And you're sure it's not just interference? Could be static." "Static with a sense of rhythm? I doubt it," Mara replied, crossing her arms. "Someone's trying to talk to us or scream for help. Either way, it's not random." Voss straightened, her expression unreadable. "Keep me posted. And doctor, don't share anything until we know what we're dealing with." "Understood." "Crystal clear," Mara said with a touch of mockery. As Voss left, Mara returned to her work, the weight of the mystery pressing down on her. The relics weren't just relics. They were the tip of a conspiracy iceberg. And with the kind of luck she had, it was probably a Titanic-sized one. Elsewhere in the prison, the inmates felt the tension tightening like a noose. Raxer and Gribbs, the galaxy's least likely comedy duo, were in the thick of it. The mess hall had become their war room, albeit one with less strategy and more stolen silverware. Gribbs clicked his mandibles, a sign he was deep in thought, or as deep as he got anyway. "If we're gonna do this, we need more than just talk." Raxer shrugged, picking at his nails. "Talk's all we've got. Unless you've got a secret stash of explosives somewhere I don't know about." "Not yet," Gribbs replied, glancing around. "But we need to find out more about those relics. If they're buzzing, they are important. And important things have value, especially to the right buyer," Raxer added, a smirk playing on his lips. "But first, we need to figure out how to get out of this tin can without becoming space debris." Gribbs nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "We need allies." Raxer followed Gribbs's gaze, taking in the motley crew of fellow inmates. "Allies, huh? Well, if we can't find any, let's just hope we can improvise." Back in the lab, Mara was drowning in data, knee-deep in conspiracy theories that even the most paranoid conspiracy theorist would find excessive. She stared at the symbols, trying to make sense of the cosmic gibberish. She leaned back, closing her eyes. "This better not be some interstellar prank call," she said to the empty room. Her comm buzzed again, a message from Warden Gull. "Updates Solstice. Same song, different verse," she replied, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Found a pattern in the relics. Could be important, or just annoying. Hard to tell." "Keep at it," Gull said, his voice tinged with the kind of authority that suggested he didn't really want to hear any more excuses. "We need answers." "Don't we all?" Mara muttered as the connection cut off. She returned to the relic, the hum now a constant companion. The symbols on the device seemed to shift in response, like they were aware of her scrutiny. With a sigh, she started to decode the sequence, piecing together a puzzle that had more pieces than a hypercharged jigsaw set. Meanwhile, Raxer and Gribbs's plan was beginning to take shape, albeit a shape that resembled a drunken spider. The mess hall was buzzing with conspiratorial whispers, the kind that were just audible enough to make Voss's hackles rise. Raxer leaned over to Gribbs. "We need to find a way to get closer to those relics, see what all the fuss is about." Gribbs clicked in agreement. "But how?" "We're not exactly on the guest list." "Then we need to crash the party," Raxer replied, his grin as sharp as a shiv. "And let's hope they don't notice us before we get what we need." "But if they do?" Gribbs asked, the possibility of failure a very real specter. "Then we improvise," Raxer said with a shrug. "Like we always do." Back in the lab, Mara finally cracked the sequence, the message jumping out at her like a slap in the face. "Well, I'll be damned," she murmured, rereading it to ensure she hadn't misinterpreted it. The message suggested a location, and more intriguingly, a directive. Whoever had sent it was orchestrating something bigger than just a prison break. It was a coordinated effort to unleash chaos on a galactic scale, and Fort Doom was ground zero. "Great," Mara said, the weight of her discovery settling in. As if a prison full of the galaxy's least desirable houseguests wasn't enough, now we've got a cosmic conspiracy on our hands. She needed to warn Voss, but she knew the captain would take it with a grain of salt. Or maybe the whole salt shaker. Either way, Mara had to try. The corridors felt even colder as she made her way to the captain's office, her mind racing with possibilities. But as she turned the corner, she stopped short, hearing voices. Voss stood in a huddle with a group of guards, her posture tense. "We can't let this get out. If it does, we're looking at a full-scale riot." Mara's heart skipped a beat. She leaned in, trying to catch more of the conversation. One of the guards, a gruff-looking veteran with a permanent scowl, shook his head. "The inmates are already on edge. They know something's up." "Then we need to contain this," Voss replied, her voice firm. "No leaks, and no more surprises." Mara pulled back, her mind whirling. If Voss was worried enough to rally the troops, then the situation was worse than she'd thought. She had to get her findings to the captain, conspiracy theories be damned. The door to the office whooshed open as she approached, and Voss looked up, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Solstice," Captain, Mara said, her tone brisk. "We need to talk." Voss nodded, dismissing the guards with a wave. "What is it?" "I've decoded part of the sequence," Mara replied, handing over her findings. "It's a directive, and it's not just about the prison, it's bigger. Someone's planning something." Voss scanned the data, her face tightening with every line. "This is serious." "Tell me something I don't know," Mara said, folding her arms. "The inmates can't get wind of this." Voss nodded. "Agreed, we need to act fast." Mara hesitated. "I know the warden wants answers, but we might not have time to be picky." Voss's gaze was steely. "Then we make time, and doctor, keep this under wraps." "We can't afford panic." Mara nodded, a knot of anxiety settling in her stomach. The pieces were in place, but the picture they formed was more than she'd bargained for. As she headed back to her lab, the hum of the relic seemed louder, an ominous reminder of the storm brewing on the horizon. The prison corridors buzzed with anticipation, and Mara couldn't shake the feeling that they were all pawns in a game that was just beginning to unfold. In the mess hall, Raxer and Gribbs exchanged a look, their plan taking shape against the backdrop of uncertainty. They were ready to strike when the time was right, and if all went well, or horribly wrong, they'd have a front-row seat to the chaos that was bound to follow. As Mara returned to her work, the relic's hum became a comforting rhythm, a reminder of the secrets she was determined to uncover. But in the shadowy corridors of Fort Doom, the inmates sensed the shifting balance, their eyes glinting with anticipation. In the oppressive silence of space, the prison drifted through the void, an island on the brink of chaos. And as the secrets of the relics began to unravel, the stage was set for a cosmic joke that would leave no one laughing. Riot! The word ricocheted through the metal intestines of Fort Doom like a bullet in a barrel, setting off a symphony of chaos. Mara Solstice felt the vibration of it in her bones as much as she did in the walls. Her lab monitors flickered, the relic's humming rose in pitch, and she was suddenly very aware of how much she didn't want to die with "not completed" written on her tombstone. "Well, that's just peachy," she muttered, grabbing a datapad and shoving it into her satchel. She spared a glance at the relic, now buzzing like an angry swarm of interstellar bees. "Keep singing, you cosmic karaoke machine." "I'll be back." The corridors of Fort Doom were a carnival of pandemonium. Inmates surged like a tide of malcontent, while the guards tried to stem the flood with the enthusiasm of overworked, underpaid lifeguards. Captain Thera Voss was barking orders, her voice sharp enough to cut through the din. "Contain! Hold them!" Her words were punctuated by the distinct thud of a truncheon meeting an inmate's thick skull. Dr. Solstice ducked into the shadows, opting for survival over heroics. This was Fort Doom. Nobody expected heroics, especially not from researchers. She edged her way toward the control room where the warden was likely bemoaning his fate and the state of his ulcer. Raxer and Gribbs, meanwhile, were right where you'd expect them in a riot, smack dab in the middle, stirring the pot. Raxer, with his infuriatingly calm demeanor, was directing traffic like a conductor ushering in an overture of catastrophe. Gribbs, on the other hand, was more of a chaotic bass note, flitting about and snapping in excitement. "Lovely weather for a riot, eh, Gribbs?" Raxer commented, dodging a flying tray. The mess hall was now a buffet of improvised weaponry. Gribbs chirped in agreement, his mandibles clicking with glee. "Think we'll finally find out what's got everyone so worked up? If we live long enough, maybe," Raxer replied, ducking as a chair flew overhead. "But first, we need to get closer to that lab. Something's cooking in there." Gribbs nodded, and the two of them slipped through the chaos like shadows, albeit very loud, purple and insectoid shadows. Back in the comparatively less violent environs of the control room, Mara found Warden Gull in his natural habitat, glued to a monitor with an expression that suggested his faith in humanity, or any sentient species, really, was at an all-time low. "Warden," Mara announced, and Gull looked up, his eyes rimmed with frustration and sleeplessness. "Solstice," he grunted. "What do you want?" "Unless you've got a miracle in that bag, I'm not interested." "I've got something," she said, trying to ignore the ominous sound of something smashing against metal outside. "The relics are part of a larger directive. We've got a bigger problem than just a riot." Gull rubbed his temple as if trying to manually squeeze out a headache. "Bigger problems? Fantastic. Just what my ulcer needs. We need to secure the lab," Mara urged, her voice rising slightly in pitch. "Whatever's happening, it's centered around the relics." Gull sighed, the sound of a man whose retirement was a distant, taunting mirage. "Fine. But if this turns into another mess, you're explaining it to the board." "Deal," Mara said, already turning on her heel to make her escape. "By the way, Voss is in the thick of it, trying to keep a lid on things." "Figures," Gull muttered, his expression suggesting he wouldn't mind trading places with a ragdoll in a pit fight. Back in the thrumming arteries of Fort Doom, Raxer and Gribbs had made it to the lab door, which was blissfully devoid of immediate threats, mainly because everyone was too busy throttling each other elsewhere. "You got that thing I asked you for?" Raxer inquired, glancing at Gribbs, who was busy fiddling with a small device. Gribbs nodded, holding up something that looked like it belonged in a junkyard more than a high-security prison. "Old power coupler. Should fry the locks, if it doesn't fry us first." "That's the spirit," Raxer said, grinning as if they were about to embark on a leisurely stroll rather than an act of blatant felony. A few sparks later, the door hissed open, and they slipped inside, the relic's ominous humming filling the room like a dirge. Raxer approached it with the reverence of a treasure hunter finding his first cursed artifact. Well, what have we here?" he murmured, reaching out to touch it. "Careful," Gribbs chirped, his eyes darting around. "Last thing we need is for it to blow up in our faces." "Relax," Raxer said, though his fingers hovered over the relic with a touch more caution. "I've got a good feeling about this." "You're the only one," Mara interjected, stepping into the room with a look that could freeze suns. Raxer turned, the picture of innocence. "Dr. Solstice, fancy meeting you here." "Yeah, imagine that," Mara replied, crossing her arms. You two have a death wish, or do you just like playing with fire? A bit of both, Raxor admitted, his grin unfazed. Something told us this was where the action was. Well, you're not wrong, Mara said, glancing at the relic that continued its mysterious melody. But you're out of your depth. Join the club, Gribbs muttered, his antennae twitching nervously. Mara sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Listen, if you two are done playing cat burglar, I could use some help. You want to find out what's going on, right? Raxor exchanged a glance with Gribbs. We do. But why help us? Because, Mara said, her voice laced with a weary pragmatism, everyone else is either too busy fighting or too stupid to see what's at stake, and right now I need all the eyes and ears I can muster. Raxor considered this, then nodded. All right, we're in. What's the plan? First, Mara said, pointing at the relic, we figure out what this thing is trying to tell us. Then we make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Gribbs clicked inquisitively. And who are the wrong hands? Anyone who isn't us, Mara replied, the ghost of a smile playing on her lips. Back outside, Captain Voss was doing her best impression of a one-woman army. Her baton sang a tune of authority against any inmate foolish enough to challenge her. She saw Gull approaching, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The lab's secure, he said, breathless from a sprint that wasn't kind to his knees. Solstice is holding it down. Apparently the relics are more than they seem. Voss snorted, cracking an inmate's jaw with a swift elbow. And here I thought they were just fancy paperweights. Yeah, well, turns out they're more like fancy grenades, Gull replied, wincing as he imagined the board's reaction to a full-blown jailbreak. Voss nodded. We need to regain control before we're dealing with a bigger mess than we can handle. Back in the lab, Mara was busy working her magic, if magic involved a lot of swearing and the occasional threat of violence to inanimate objects. These symbols, she said, gesturing at the relic's display, are coordinates, locations. They're pointing us somewhere. Hopefully not the heart of a black hole, Raxor quipped, peering over her shoulder. Unlikely, Mara replied, though she couldn't entirely dismiss the idea. And once we figure out where they lead, Gribbs asked, his curiosity outweighing his usual caution. Then, Mara said, a determined glint in her eye, we decide whether to follow or destroy them. Either way, we can't let them fall into someone else's hands. Raxor nodded, appreciating the gravity of the situation. Sounds dangerous. Everything worthwhile is, Mara replied, with the kind of fatalistic optimism that only comes from living on the edge of disaster. The prison riot continued to swirl around them, a storm of chaos and uncertainty. And as Mara, Raxor, and Gribbs aligned their unlikely alliance, they realized that Fort Doom had become more than a prison. It was a battlefield, and the war was only just beginning to unfold. In the midst of it all, the relic hummed its mysterious song, as if laughing at the cosmic joke unfolding around it. Mara Solstice was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, she should have taken up knitting instead of astrophysics. Less chance of being caught in the middle of a riot with a buzzing relic and a lab full of alien prisoners looking at her like she was the last slice of cake at a birthday party. But here she was, not knitting, definitely not safe, and more than a little worried about what the next 5 minutes would bring. Raxor and Gribbs, her unlikely allies in this cosmic farce, were busy making themselves scarce as the first of the alien prisoners breached the lab. They poured in like a torrent, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and opportunism. Mara couldn't blame them. Fort Doom had a way of turning everyone into gamblers, betting with their lives because that's all they had left to wager. Well, this is cozy, Mara muttered, backing up against the relic. It hummed louder, almost as if it was egging on the chaos. You know, I'd offer you all tea, but I'm fresh out of civilities. A hulking figure with scales glistening like a reptilian disco ball shoved his way to the front. He looked like he had a PhD in intimidation, majoring in menacing glares. You, he rasped, pointing a clawed finger at Mara. You know what this thing is, don't you? Maybe, Mara replied, non-committal as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. But my knowledge comes with a price. Raxer, who had somehow reappeared like a bad penny, decided to play mediator. "Easy there, Scaly," he said, his voice smooth as oil on ice. "Dr. Solstice here is our ticket out of this mess. You rough her up and we might as well start digging our graves." The scaly prisoner looked like he was weighing the pros and cons of just that when Gribbs chirped in. "If we're all done chest beating, maybe we should focus on not getting pulverized by the guards. Just a thought." "Smart bug," Mara noted, giving Gribbs an approving nod. "Listen, we need to figure out what this relic is broadcasting. It's got coordinates, possibly to somewhere we can get answers, or maybe just a one-way trip to a black hole. But we need to try." The room fell into a tense silence, the kind that usually precedes a decision to do something incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. Mara had a feeling it would be a mix of both. Meanwhile, out in the pandemonium that had once been a somewhat manageable prison, Captain Thera Voss was orchestrating her own symphony of chaos. Her baton sang its own grim tune against the riotous inmates, but for everyone she knocked down, two more took their place. It was like trying to mop up an ocean with a sponge. Warden Gull, who had chosen the noble strategy of trying to blend into the walls, was finally dragged back into the action by Voss's irritated bark. "Gull, get your ass over here." The warden shuffled over, looking like a man who would rather be anywhere else, preferably somewhere with a beach and no inmates. "What now, Captain?" "Orders from above," she snapped, gesturing wildly at the chaos. "We need to contain this before it turns into a full-blown revolution. Any bright ideas?" Gull sighed, the sound of a man whose soul had been slowly eroded by years of dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. "We need to isolate the troublemakers. Secure the lab if it's as critical as Solstice says. If those relics are more than ornaments, we can't let them fall into the wrong hands." Captain Voss nodded, her eyes scanning the tide of unruly inmates. "All right, I'll rally the guards. Try not to lose whatever's left of your sanity." With that less than comforting thought, she plunged back into the fray, yelling orders and cracking skulls like a woman possessed. Back in the lab, the atmosphere had shifted from hostile to something slightly less homicidal. Raxer, sensing an opportunity, addressed the room. "All right, folks, we're at a crossroads. We either work together, make sense of what these relics mean, or we go back to our cells and wait for the guards to finish their cleanup. Personally, I vote for not getting my head bashed in." There was a murmur of agreement, self-preservation being a universally appealing cause, and Mara seized the moment. "Okay, we need someone to run interference while I work on these coordinates. The rest of you can either help or stay out of my way. Your call." The motley crew of misfits nodded, and Mara turned her focus back to the relic. It continued its cryptic tune, and she had the distinct sensation it was laughing at her. No matter. She'd cracked tougher nuts than this before, though not usually under threat of immediate bodily harm. As she worked, Gribbs hovered nearby, curiosity dancing in his eyes. "You really think this thing is the key to getting us out of here?" "Think?" Mara snorted. "No, but it's a lead, and right now that's about all I've got. Besides, mystery-solving beats getting my skull cracked open any day." "Fair enough," Gribbs said, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Just make sure you leave something for me to chew on when this is all over." "Deal," Mara replied, tapping away at her datapad. The symbols were beginning to form a pattern, a string of numbers and letters that might as well have been Sanskrit for all their immediate clarity. But it was progress. Suddenly, the lab's door swung open again, and Captain Voss stormed in, flanked by a couple of beleaguered guards. She took one look at the hodgepodge of prisoners and raised an eyebrow. "This a study group, or did I miss the memo on the prison book club?" "Just a friendly get-together, Captain," Raxer said smoothly, as if they were all there by choice. Voss wasn't buying it, but she let it slide. "Gull says this place is critical. Solstice, tell me you've got something better than a headache to show for all this." Mara waved her datapad like a talisman. "Coordinates, Captain. Not sure where they lead, but they're coming from this relic. It's got to be connected to the attempted breach." "Great." More questions, Voss said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. All right, we've got to buy you time. Can you make sense of it? Can I? Mara mused, a wry smile tugging at her lips. With a big enough lever I could move worlds, but for now I'll settle for cracking this code. Voss nodded, her expression one of determination tempered with exhaustion. All right, we'll hold the line, you focus on that code, but if this goes belly up, we're all screwed. No pressure then, Mara replied, rolling her eyes. But don't worry. We'll crack this before the inmates get bored of rioting. As the noise outside grew louder, Mara worked frantically, her fingers dancing over the screen. The coordinates were solidifying, the pieces falling into place like a cosmic jigsaw. I've got it, she declared, a mix of triumph and relief. The coordinates lead to an old military outpost. Could be a stash, could be a trap, but it's something. Then let's not waste any more time, Raxer said, his patience wearing thin. We need to get there and figure out what's really going on. Voss nodded, already flipping through her mental Rolodex of strategies. All right, we'll need a ship. And I guess now's as good a time as any for a field trip. What about the rest of us? Asked the scaly prisoner, his eyes darting nervously. You've got two options, Voss said, her gaze steady. Sit tight until we sort this out, or try your luck with the guards. My advice, don't do anything stupid. The prisoners exchanged looks and Mara seized the moment. Look, I know this isn't ideal. But if we want to get out of here alive, we need to work together. Once we're out, we can reassess. There was a begrudging nod of consensus, a silent acknowledgement that desperation was a powerful motivator. Voss turned to Mara, her expression a mixture of skepticism and reluctant trust. You sure about this? Nope, Mara replied, a wry grin on her face. But it beats sticking around here waiting for the next riot. With their plan set, Mara, Raxer, Gribbs, and Voss prepared to make their move. Outside, the sounds of the riot ebbed and flowed like a tide, the prison teetering on the edge of complete anarchy. As they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of Fort Doom, Mara couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here she was, allied with a ragtag group of misfits, chasing down a mystery that could very well lead to their doom. But then again, what was life without a little risk? As they reached the hangar, Voss barked orders to the guards, securing a path to a waiting shuttle. It was time to leave Fort Doom behind and chase down the answers that had been eluding them. Let's go find out what this relic is really hiding, Mara said, a determined glint in her eye. And with that, they boarded the shuttle, leaving the chaos of Fort Doom behind and setting their sights on the unknown, a future as uncertain as it was promising. The shuttle interior hummed with a low, mechanical rhythm, but it was nothing compared to the tension radiating off Mara and her unlikely band of escapees. The ragtag group had wedged themselves into seats designed for a more conventional type of prisoner transport, namely, sedated and not prone to breaking out into a deadly brawl. Mara sat hunched over her datapad, the relic's decoded coordinates glaring back at her like a particularly smug crossword puzzle. She'd cracked it, but the solution was about as comforting as an ice bath. The coordinates pointed to a spot not too far from Fort Doom, an old military outpost that had more rumors about it than any respectable ghost story. Raxer, having decided he wasn't going to die quietly, leaned over conspiratorially. So, Doc, what's the verdict? Are we flying into a treasure chest or a lion's den? Could be both, Mara said, flicking her eyes up from the screen. But if the relic's broadcasting something, it's not come for the gold, stay for the hospitality. Gribbs, eternally pragmatic, clicked his mandibles in that irritatingly insightful way of his. If the invaders wanted to use this prison as a launching pad, doesn't it make sense they'd stash something nearby? Maybe more relics. Or a secret weapon. Now there's a cheerful thought, Mara said, her voice as dry as a Martian desert. They come for the vacation package, stay for the galactic domination. Captain Voss, from her post near the shuttle's cockpit, turned halfway with a glare that could melt steel. Let's keep speculation to a minimum. We're here to confirm, not write a bloody novel. I'd read it, Gribbs piped up, earning himself a collective groan from the shuttle's occupants. Meanwhile, the scaly prisoner, who had introduced himself with the charming moniker K-Larg, sat brooding in the corner like a lizard pondering existential crises. He had all the social skills of a brick, but seemed to get the gist of things quickly enough. "So, what's our plan once we hit this outpost?" K-Larg asked, his voice rough as gravel but surprisingly free of malice. Raxer leaned back, fingers interlaced behind his head. "Well, I say we go in guns blazing. Not because it's a good idea, but because it's the only idea we've got," Voss snorted. "And here I thought I was the reckless one. We don't know what's down there. Could be a garrison, could be a trap, or it could be our way off this rock," Mara added, her gaze lingering on the relic as it sat humming innocuously on the console. "Whatever the old military outpost has, it's definitely not just an abandoned set of barracks. The relic didn't start broadcasting for no reason." "Right," Voss agreed reluctantly. "First sign of trouble, we abort. I'm not in the mood to become a footnote in a tale of alien conquest." "I'll drink to that," Raxer said, though he clearly meant metaphorically since no one had seen a decent beverage in months. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thunk, the hatch opening to reveal a barren landscape that both inspired dread and a sense of inevitability. Mara had never been to a place that felt more like the universe's version of a forgotten attic, full of secrets and probably a few unpleasant surprises. As they disembarked, the wind kicked up dust devils that danced around their feet like mischievous spirits. The outpost lay ahead, a series of structures half buried in the sand, as if the planet itself was trying to swallow the past whole. Voss took point, her gun drawn with the confidence of someone who had spent more time in firefights than quiet moments. "Stay sharp." "If this was easy, they wouldn't have left it to us," comforting Mara murmured, keeping an eye on the relic's constant hum, which had grown louder, as if excited to be home. The group moved cautiously towards the outpost, every creak of metal and whisper of wind setting their nerves on edge. Mara's mind kept circling back to the relic's signal and what it could mean, the implications chilling enough to freeze her blood. As they entered the main building, the atmosphere shifted from desolate to downright oppressive. The corridors were lined with panels that blinked with dim, erratic life, hinting at systems still clinging to functionality despite years of neglect. Raxer, ever the curious cat, brushed dust off a control panel, revealing a map of the outpost. "Looks like we've got a central command room, barracks, and something labeled research. Let's hope research doesn't mean biological hazards," Gribbs muttered, earning a chuckle from Mara. "Let's split up and cover more ground," Voss suggested, because nothing said team building like separating in a potentially hostile environment. "Raxer, take Gribbs and check out research. K-Larg and I will handle the barracks. Mara, you take command. If that relic has friends, command would be the place to find them." "Sure," Mara replied with a nod, masking her skepticism under a layer of feigned enthusiasm. "I'll just be over here, chatting up the ghosts of military past." With plans set, they dispersed, their footsteps echoing hollowly through the metal hallways. Mara made her way to the command center, every shadow seeming to stretch toward her with the promise of lurking threats. The door creaked open to reveal a room that was a cocktail of technology and decay. Consoles lined the walls, blinking in a disconcerting rhythm that matched the relic's hum. It was like stepping into the mind of a chaotic, ancient machine. Mara approached the central console, her mind racing with possibilities. If the relic was tied to this place, then this was the nerve center. With a few taps and some choice words about antiquated technology, the console sputtered to life, revealing data streams that flickered across the screen. It was a mess of numbers, symbols, and old military jargon that made her head spin. "All right, you bastard," she muttered to the console as if it could hear her. "Show me what's so important you had to ruin my day." The answer came in the form of a data log, a record from the past detailing shipments, experiments, and most disturbingly, a blueprint for invasion. The outpost had been a staging ground, a place for assembling an army, hidden under the guise of a forgotten relic. Mara's stomach turned. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," she keyed her comms, voice tight. "Guys, we've got a problem. This place isn't just a relic dump. It's a staging ground for an invasion. There's more of those things out there, and they're not just for decoration." Voss's voice crackled back, laced with the kind of calm that precedes a storm. "Then we need to get out of here fast." "No argument there," Mara replied, frantically scrolling through the data for anything they could use. Her fingers paused on a section marked contingency. "Wait," Mara said, her voice cutting through the static. "I think there's a self-destruct protocol. We could blow this place sky high, take the relics with it." "Are you sure?" Raxor chimed in. "That sounds like a last resort kind of plan. It's the best chance we've got to shut down their operation," Mara answered, determination stealing her voice. "If we don't, they'll just come back and finish what they started." "Do it," Voss instructed, the weight of their situation evident in her tone. "But make sure we're clear before you hit the button." "Easier said than done," Mara muttered, her fingers flying over the console to initiate the sequence. The panel confirmed her input, a countdown beginning its ominous march. "All right, let's regroup at the shuttle," Voss ordered, urgency pushing them into motion. "Time to leave this sandbox behind." The team reconvened at the shuttle, their expressions a mix of relief and tension. The hum of the relic echoed faintly in Mara's ears, a reminder of the stakes they'd gambled with. As they boarded the shuttle, Kalarg turned to Mara, his eyes betraying a flicker of gratitude. "You humans have an interesting way of handling crises." "Thanks," Mara replied dryly. "We aim to please." The shuttle lifted off, leaving the outpost to its fate, the countdown ticking towards an explosive finale. Mara watched from the viewport as they distanced themselves from the site, the tension in her chest unraveling with every mile that put them further away from the ticking time bomb. Finally, as the outpost became a distant speck, a flash of light erupted, the explosion swallowing the complex and its secrets in one fiery gulp. The shockwave rippled outwards, a spectacle of destruction that signaled not just an end but a beginning. Mara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. They'd bought themselves a reprieve, a chance to figure out what came next. But as the shuttle continued its journey, the weight of their next steps hung heavy, a reminder that the game was far from over. "Well," Raxor said, breaking the silence with his trademark grin, "that was fun." "What's next on the agenda?" Mara chuckled, despite herself. "How about we start with not getting killed? Works for me," Gribbs added, settling back into his seat with a sigh of relief. As they sped away from the ruins of an alien plot, the group could almost believe they had a fighting chance. Because if there was one lesson Fort Doom had taught them, it was that they were far from alone in their struggles. And with allies, no matter how strange, came strength. In the depths of space, their journey continued, a fragile alliance forged in the fires of adversity. They had a long way to go, but for now they were alive, free of the chains that had bound them to Fort Doom. And Mara, staring out at the stars, couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. The shuttle hummed along the empty void of space like a stubborn beetle refusing to die. Inside, Mara Solstice was busy fiddling with the relic, its incessant hum now more like a mosquito that had taken a personal interest in annoying the hell out of her. "Anyone else hear that?" she asked, her tone laced with a kind of half-hearted optimism that only came from knowing you were probably screwed but hoping otherwise. "Hear what?" Kalar grunted from his seat, his scales catching the dim light of the shuttle's interior. His eyes, resembling molten metal pools, questioned her sanity. "The relic. It's like it's got a vendetta against my eardrums," Mara replied, placing the buzzing artifact back on the console as if it were a live grenade. Just think of it as a soundtrack to our glorious escape," Raxor chimed in, ever the optimist, if by optimist you meant someone who could find a silver lining in a nuclear fallout. Voss, who was busy piloting the shuttle with the grace of a drunk ballerina, finally spoke up. "Don't worry, once we're far enough from ground zero it'll quiet down. or we'll all be dead and won't care. It's a win-win. Mara could only roll her eyes because, frankly, sarcasm was the only currency they had in abundance. Right. And here I thought we'd have a peaceful retirement after blowing up an alien invasion staging ground. Peaceful's overrated, Gribbs added, clicking his mandibles thoughtfully. Kinda like decaf coffee. The crew chuckled, a sound that was more gallows humor than genuine mirth. The shuttle's cramped space was filled with a tension that could slice through steel, yet here they were, laughing in the face of imminent destruction. Humans and their ragtag band of alien allies really had a knack for irony. "All right, folks, we've got another problem," Voss announced, her tone now as serious as an audit. "Scanners are picking up a fleet heading our way. Looks like the real owners of our little relic party want their toys back." "Great," Mara sighed, rubbing her temples. "Just once I'd like to escape with all my limbs attached and no death sentences hanging over my head." Raxer leaned forward, peering at the scanners. "Well, they haven't engaged yet. Maybe they're just here for a friendly chat. Do I look like I was born yesterday?" Voss shot back, her voice as dry as the deserts of Mars. "No, wait, don't answer that. So what's the plan?" Mara asked, knowing full well the plan was likely to involve copious amounts of running, screaming, and possibly some screaming while running. "Well, we could let them board, offer them tea and cookies, and see how they feel about diplomacy," Raxer suggested, his grin as wide as a chasm. Or, Voss countered, "we could remember that Mara found a whole bunch of data about their operation. Maybe we can use it to our advantage." Mara brightened slightly, the gears in her mind whirring like a rusty old machine suddenly given a dose of oil. "You know, I did see something about a counter-signal, a frequency that could disrupt their communications, and you didn't mention this before because—" Kalarg asked, his voice a low rumble. "Because I was busy not getting us vaporized," Mara retorted. "But now seems like a good time to test it out." Gribbs's mandibles clicked in approval. "Sounds like a plan. Let's just hope it's the kind that doesn't end with us scattered across several sectors." Mara quickly worked her magic, or what passed for it with a relic and a vintage datapad, trying to coax the contraption into doing something useful. The relic's hum shifted in tone, as if responding to her commands, and the shuttle's systems began to sync with her inputs. "All right, I've got the frequency. Let's see if we can't make their day as miserable as yours," Mara said, confidence returning like an old friend who mostly just borrows money. With a few more keystrokes, the shuttle emitted a pulse of energy, a silent shockwave rippling through the void. Somewhere out there, the invading fleet likely felt the cosmic equivalent of a cold shower. Raxer watched the screen with anticipation. "I don't see any explosions." "That's a good sign. Let's just say if they're not exploding, they're probably very, very confused," Mara replied, settling back into her seat with a sigh of relief. Voss steered the shuttle with renewed purpose, her eyes scanning the stars for any sign of pursuit. "All right, let's get to Fort Doom. I have a feeling they're going to regret housing us." As they approached the infamous outpost, a hodgepodge of old ships and debris greeted them, like an art exhibit curated by a madman. The fort itself loomed ahead, a fortress of secrets and shame that had become their unlikely sanctuary. The shuttle docked with a satisfying clunk, the crew disembarking with a mix of relief and trepidation. The corridors of Fort Doom were as they remembered, dank, depressing, and smelling faintly of desperation. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The prisoners, both human and alien, buzzed with rumors of the impending invasion, their faces a tapestry of fear and defiance. Thera Voss took charge, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had long ago given up on being liked but never on being respected. "All right, listen up. We've got hostiles incoming, and unless you all want to end up in some alien zoo, we need to work together." The assembled prisoners murmured amongst themselves, a chorus of doubt and mistrust. But then Mara stepped forward, the relic in her hand glowing softly, its significance not lost on the crowd. "We've got a plan," Mara said, her voice steady, determined. "We disrupt their signals, sow chaos in their ranks, and then we hit them with everything we've got." An alien prisoner with eyes like molten amber stepped forward, his voice a gravelly rumble. "And why should we trust you?" "Because," Mara replied, a smirk playing on her lips, "it's either that or you wait around to become someone's dinner. Your choice." The alien considered this, then nodded. "What do you need us to do?" "Arm yourselves, prepare defenses," Voss instructed. "And when the time comes, fight like hell." As the prisoners set to work, the outpost transformed from a den of despair into a hive of defiance. Makeshift defenses were erected, weapons distributed, and a plan of attack cobbled together with the same grace as a last-minute science project. Mara, meanwhile, focused on the relic, coaxing it to life with a mixture of ingenuity and sheer bloody-mindedness. The artifact responded, its hum resonating with the outpost systems, a symphony of disruption poised to unleash chaos. Raxor sidled up to her, a sly grin on his face. "Never thought I'd see the day an invasion would bring people together," Mara chuckled, despite the gravity of their situation. "I know, right? Nothing like impending doom to foster community spirit." The tension in the air was palpable as they waited, the calm before the storm stretching taut like a wire ready to snap. Then the first wave of enemy ships appeared on the horizon, their sleek forms cutting through the void with predatory grace. "Here they come," Voss announced, her voice a beacon of calm in the rising storm. "Everyone, get ready." As the enemy closed in, Mara activated the relic's counter-signal, the artifact pulsing with energy. A ripple of confusion spread through the invading fleet, their formations faltering as chaos took hold. "Now," Voss shouted, and with a battle cry that echoed through the corridors, the defenders of Fort Doom launched their counterattack. The clash that ensued was a maelstrom of violence and valor, a cacophony of explosions and shouts that reverberated through the outpost. Humans and aliens fought side by side, their unlikely alliance forged in the crucible of desperation. Mara found herself at the heart of the battle, the relic in one hand, a blaster in the other. Each shot she fired felt like a personal vendetta against the universe that had seen fit to throw her into this cosmic mess. Raxor fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, his laughter mingling with the din of battle as he dispatched foes with reckless abandon. Gribbs, ever the pragmatist, used his technical skills to sabotage enemy systems, turning their own technology against them. K-Larg, despite his earlier misgivings, fought with the determination of someone who had decided that death was only an acceptable option if it came with a high body count. As the battle raged, Mara caught sight of Voss, her captain's precision and efficiency carving a swath through the enemy ranks. Amidst the chaos, there was a beauty to their defiance, a testament to the resilience of life in all its forms. But for all their bravado, the defenders of Fort Doom were not invincible. Casualties mounted, the cost of their defiance etched into the walls in blood and smoke. Mara's heart ached with each loss, but there was no time for grief. Not yet. There was only the battle, the struggle to survive against overwhelming odds. "Keep fighting." Voss's voice rang out, a rallying cry that pushed them onward. "We're not done yet." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the enemy began to falter. The disruption caused by the relic, combined with the sheer tenacity of the defenders, had turned the tide. The remaining invaders retreated, their forces scattered, their plans in ruins. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded, a weary cheer rose from the survivors, a sound of defiance and victory. Mara slumped against a wall, exhaustion pulling at her like a relentless tide. She glanced at the relic, its glow softening as if acknowledging a job well done. "Well, that was fun," Raxor panted, collapsing next to her. "Think they'll invite us back for next year's reunion?" Mara chuckled, her laughter a balm for her weary soul. "I think we'll pass this time." Voss joined them, her expression a mix of pride and exhaustion. "We did it," she said simply, the weight of their achievement settling over them like a warm cloak. "Yeah," Mara agreed, her heart swelling with a rare sense of hope. We did, and as they sat amidst the ruins of their battle, the stars overhead twinkling with unyielding indifference, Mara knew they had achieved something remarkable. Against all odds, they had stood their ground and fought back. In that moment, under the vast canvas of space, Mara Solstice found her purpose. No longer a prisoner of fate, but a force to be reckoned with, ready to face whatever the universe dared to throw at her next. The corridors of Fort Doom were a mess, like a teenager's bedroom after a particularly vigorous bout of angst. Smoke hung in the air, mixed with the scent of burnt circuitry and singed alien flesh. But there was something else too, a buzz of energy, an undercurrent of triumph that suggested, just maybe, things were looking up. Dr. Mara Solstice dragged herself from the battlefield, her limbs protesting every step. Exhaustion clung to her like an overbearing relative who'd overstayed their welcome. The relic, now dim and silent, hung from her hand like a piece of junk. A particularly expensive, life-saving piece of junk. "Well," she muttered, leaning against a wall that seemed to sag with relief, "I've had dates that went worse." Raxer, nursing a bruise that was already the color of a stormy sky, sauntered up beside her. "Yeah, must have been some kind of dates," Mara smirked. "You'd be surprised how many end with less bloodshed." Raxer chuckled, which quickly turned into a wince. "Remind me to never join your dating app." The other survivors, a ragtag assembly of multi-species camaraderie, were patching themselves up and exchanging stories of how close they came to becoming space debris. Some were even laughing, a sound that seemed almost alien in the grim halls of the prison. Captain Thera Voss, still carrying the aura of someone who had long ago traded in optimism for a good blaster, approached them. Her uniform was scorched, but her gaze was steady. "We survived," she said, as if daring anyone to disagree. "Yep," Mara replied, "against all odds, or maybe because of them. The universe does love irony." "What now?" Raxer asked, rubbing his sore jaw. Mara considered this, glancing around at the makeshift band of misfits who had somehow pulled off the impossible. Fort Doom had become, against all expectations, a symbol of unity, albeit one that smelled like an armpit and looked like a junkyard. "I think," Mara said slowly, "we need to figure out what the hell happens next, because I'm not planning on sticking around for the next invasion party." Voss nodded. "We have a chance here. A chance to change things, to make something better, or at least less terrible," Raxer added helpfully. "Exactly," Mara said. "I mean, who knew that a grimy old relic could unite species that normally can't even agree on what's edible?" Gribbs clicked his mandibles in agreement, his eyes reflecting a sort of resigned amusement. "Perhaps if all relics hummed as annoyingly as yours, we'd have galactic peace." "Yeah, maybe we should mass-produce the thing," Mara quipped. "Humming for peace, one headache at a time." Amidst the ruins of their surroundings, Kalarg stood off to the side, observing the scene with a thoughtful grunt. He had been reluctant to join the fight, but now his presence, like the others, felt integral. This had become their battle, their victory, and weirdly enough, their home. "We should get back to Earth," Mara announced suddenly, the decision crystallizing in her mind with an unexpected clarity. "There's a lot to do, a lot to rebuild, and maybe, just maybe, we can use this stupid relic to start something new." Raxer seemed intrigued. "You mean like a new interspecies alliance or something?" "Because I'm all for peace, but do I have to talk to everyone? Some of these guys have seriously questionable hygiene habits," Mara snorted. "We'll work on it, one step at a time. First, let's see if we can't get back without triggering another war." As they made their preparations, Mara couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a reluctant researcher to a battlefield leader, she'd been transformed by the chaos around her, a transformation that wasn't complete but was certainly underway. "Do you think Warden Gull will be pissed we hijacked his shuttle?" Raxer asked, fiddling with a panel that looked like it had seen better days. "Considering he's probably still off sulking somewhere about the invasion," Mara replied, "I'd say it's low on his list of grievances." And besides, it's not like he was doing anything useful with it. Voss, supervising the repairs with the grace of a drill sergeant, added, "Besides, Gull's the kind of guy who sees a disaster and thinks, finally, something to complain about." Their banter, as darkly humorous as ever, carried them through the preparations. The prisoners turned allies moved with a determination born of necessity and a grim acceptance that this was their best shot at getting out alive. Finally, the shuttle was ready. It looked about as inviting as a coffin with a window, but it would get them to Earth, and that was enough. As they boarded, Mara took one last look at Fort Doom. The place had been a hellhole, sure, but it had also been a crucible for change. And maybe, against every cynical instinct she'd ever had, she felt a twinge of affection for the dump. "Ready, Doctor?" Voss asked, settling into the pilot's seat with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were the best of a bad lot. "Let's get the hell out of here," Mara said, taking a seat beside her. "Earth awaits, and who knows, maybe we'll even save it from itself." As the shuttle lifted off, the battered outpost of Fort Doom shrank into the distance, its troubles now someone else's problem. The stars stretched out before them, indifferent yet painfully beautiful in their own aloof way. "Think we'll make a difference?" Raxor asked, a hint of uncharacteristic seriousness creeping into his tone. Mara shrugged, glancing at the relic in her hands. "Who knows, but at least we'll give them something to think about, and if that doesn't work, there's always Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Gribbs inquired, clicking his mandibles in curiosity. "Same as Plan A," Mara replied with a grin, but with more swearing. As the shuttle hummed into the void, its occupants settled into a tired but hopeful silence. They were headed for home, whatever that meant now, and ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them next. It wasn't a happy ending. Those were for fairy tales and soap operas. But it was an ending full of potential, and in the grimdark expanse of space, that was about as good as it got. So they pressed on, leaving behind one chapter and beginning another, with sarcasm, determination, and just enough dark humor to light the way.